Discovering the spiritual and scientific universe, the Universal Learning Series. I'm your host, Andy Andrew. Welcome. On this edition of the show, we will be discussing the topic, Be Your Own Healer, with best-selling author Deborah King. The new book, Be Your Own Shaman, takes you on one-of-a-kind journey into the esoteric world of healing. You might not realize it, but just about everyone is a natural-born healer. In fact, you probably already have some of the paranormal abilities related to this gift. For example, you may know who's calling before you answer the phone, or be able to sense what others are thinking or feeling. But you can further develop your inner talents and become your own shaman, capable of healing whatever ails you and effecting change in someone else's energy field and body. Combining her personal history and wisdom, Deborah King wrote the national bestseller Truth Heals, which explores the powerful relationship between the suppression of painful emotions and their impact on our health and happiness. Deborah travels worldwide, helping thousands of people transform their lives through her experimental workshops. Please visit her website, DeborahKingCenter.com. That's DeborahKingCenter.com. And let's welcome the New York Times best-selling author, Deborah King, to the Universal Learning Series radio show.
Hi, Sandy. How are you?
Very well. Thank you for joining us here today, Deborah. How are you?
I'm delighted to be here.
Okay. One thing that struck me reading your book is that you value honesty very much. Tell us a little bit about that, please.
Well, I learned that the hard way. When I was a young attorney in my 20s, I didn't realize just how many lies I was telling. And I found out, Sandy, it's not the lies that we tell other people that are really damaging. It's the ones we tell ourselves. And I was, merrily sailing along thinking that everything was just peachy keen, and I woke up with cancer at 25. And it dawned on me, that there perhaps was something going on there that I wasn't acknowledging. So I got off the treadmill of my life for just a moment and looked at myself, and I was genuinely horrified. I realized I'd been Band-Aiding whatever emotions were trying to rise. I would not acknowledge them. I would not ever acknowledge how I really felt. And instead I would, turn to alcohol, Valium, extreme dieting, long-distance running, anything to take my mind away from myself. So I stopped doing that. Instead, I went to a 12-step program and cleaned up my act. I started journaling to get to know myself better. I started making lists of emotions, and I would try to pinpoint the ones that I had. Was I frightened? What was I so scared of? What was I so mad about? Mm-hmm. And in the process of doing that and seeking out a lot of healing, this amazing remission from cancer. So I know how much being true to yourself can do for your health, your happiness, your solvency, for every aspect of your life.
And what's another interesting fact that I learned reading your journey is that while recently you have, we'll call it successful in relative terms, with your business and your books and that type of thing and teaching these wonderful things, the knowledge that you have, your journey in training was not full of roses neither, and I had an extreme chuckle when you referenced yourself as Cinderella, because you would get the dirty chores because you didn't really think you were good enough, or they didn't think, or whatever. But tell us about your journey in training, because you referenced that quite a lot during the book.
Yeah, I do, because I was not a gifted student at healing at all. So when I left the corporate world, because I was so fascinated by this healing experience I'd had myself, and I wanted to learn how to duplicate that for other people. What made the cancer come? What made it leave? Could I reproduce this for others? I was just so intrigued, and I started studying healing, and I was not by any means a gifted student. I often was parked in the back of the room and told not to engage. And it was many years and a lot of frustration before I started to achieve any kind of results. And I think this was probably maybe the most formative part of my journey. It was very humbling.
Isn't it ironic that the great teachers of the world all seem to be humble?
It's true, and I want to share an important point with all your listeners, both men and women, because I know that both men and women go through a midlife or menopausal sort of an experience. What I noticed was that everything vastly improved for me post-menopause. It's just like threw doors open in terms of the skills I was trying to develop. And I actually think there's an energetic connection to that, because at least one of the main things people experience when they expand their consciousness is hot flashes. And, possibly nature is delivering us something with that midlife experience that is energetically connected, that makes us wiser and broader and able to connect with more knowledge.
Well, your journey, whatever form it took, Deborah, has led you to where you are now, and I had the pleasure of reading your book, and I will say from a personal perspective that it's very, very good. In fact, it's one of the best spiritual books I've come across in a long time. So,
excellent. Thank you. Well, writing Be Your Own Shaman was such a fun experience for me. It was one of the few things I've ever done that was relatively easy. Everything else I feel like I have to try really hard. And yet when I wrote that book, it was just like falling off a log. And I think that means, I know that what that means. It means that you're really in your true purpose, and you're taking what nature gave you and you're using it when you don't have to force it, and it comes easily. Right. And your book just oozes of honesty, and it oozes of healing energy. And you've got one or two exercises in there which are really simple to do and extraordinarily beneficial. And again, it points us to the great mystery of the universe, why. But let's not worry about the why and the how, and just know that it works. So let's talk about now some of the content that's in your book, Be Your Own Shaman. What is energy medicine, Deborah? Well, let me just interject one thing that responds to your point about a point about the book itself, is that I want to encourage listeners to pick up a copy of Be Your Own Shaman. It was a total sellout in the first week. It hit the New York Times bestseller list the first and second week. So they're running out of copies right now and madly doing reprints, but there's still availability on Amazon. And when you do get a copy, be sure you order a hard copy, and I'll tell you why. This is the one book. I love ebooks, okay? I never go anywhere without my ebook reader. But this is one book you want to have in hard copy form, because two reasons. One is I'm in the energy business, and I'll respond to your question about that in a second. But because that's my field, I know how to inject a certain energy into an object. And so I've actually imparted an energy to this book. So it's important that the reader actually touches it and has it in their hands. And then secondly, this is a more traditional reason, it really is a reference book, as you know, you've read it, chock full of exercises and things you can do at home. And it's so much easier if you have it at your fingertips as a reference book.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And I got them very strong vibes from your book. It's no different to when you meet person. It's what you write about in your book. When you meet a person, the vibe you get from them, or if you look at a picture, or if you touch something, you get a vibe. And your book has a very strong vibe to it,
right,
Deborah.
And then I want to go back to your question. You're saying, what is energy medicine? Well, it's pretty easy to connect those words. First of all, energy is something that we have a better feel for these days. We know it's all around us. It's infrared. It's X-ray. I mean, it's, the whole internet is a form of energy. So we're much more in touch with that kind of thing now. And medicine is something that affects a change. And in this case, the energy is the medicine.
Okay. Right. What would be the first steps for a newbie in getting into this field of energy medicine? And I know you go through it in your book, your guidelines, but just give them some couple of points for you. What's the first step, apart from buying your book?
Well, it depends on what their problem is, and that's why I'd urge them to read the book and then plug in the part that works the best for them. Because maybe one person has problems with psychic attack from other people.
Can I stop you on that point there, Deborah? Because I was watching a video with you. I think you're on Lifetime Television, and you mentioned that comment. I'm like, wow, we need to stop press and talk about that next week.
But it's true, we all know it. We know when we've been negatively influenced by the energy of someone around us.
Right. So what can we do about it?
Well, I've studied with the shamans, mostly South American shamans have given me a lot of training in that regard. They were very attuned to it. They taught me how to see it, how to combat it, how to remove it from yourself. And so that's one of the things I teach in Be Your Own Shaman, depending if it's low-level negative energy, which I've given a very scientific name to. I call it slime.
Yeah, I saw that.
That's what it looks like. And there I teach you how easy that is to undo. That's where you've had some unexpected negative encounter with someone. It could be on the phone. It could be via email. They might just be thinking negative thoughts your direction. And then you just know you don't feel well and you don't know why. And in Be Your Own Shaman, I tackle that topic. I explain how to undo that dynamic and also how to avoid it in the future so it never happens. And then, Sandy, there are higher levels of psychic attack. Mm-hmm. There's more invasive levels where somebody, really has it out for you. And I describe techniques both, and I also describe some simpler techniques on my Facebook page. So if you go to my page on Facebook, Deborah King, Deborah, and just like it, it will open doors for you to try on some of these psychic attack practices, some of the shamanic techniques I teach right there on Facebook, some of the easier ones.
Deborah, you write a lot in your book about human energy field. Can you tell us a little bit more about that, please?
Well, you probably already know this, and I bet most of your listeners do too, because you're a pretty astute crowd, that there's an energy field around every object, and modern physics, of course, backs this up now. But mm-hmm. the ancients, they always knew it, and that energy field, in the case of the human body, it actually precedes our existence. So the field is there first, and then out of it grows the body. So when we have spiritual problems or emotional problems or physical problems, they're in our field first and then in our body. And that's why we can often ward something off, steer it away from us if we're attuned and working with a practitioner. We can get rid of something before it causes, some serious damage. So your energy field is a multi-layered, multifaceted affair, and you want it to be in complete dynamic interchange all the time with your environment so that it's letting the good energy in and sending out energy that's exhausted or has been used. Constant. You want dynamic interplay. You never want it static or stuck. That's a kiss of death.
Yeah. Well, on that note, Deborah, about bringing energy in and out, your meditations and your research on the chakras are very interesting. Can you explain to the people what the 6 and 7 levels are and how to do that in a meditation, how to have them clockwise?
Well, there are 7 main levels to your primary personal energy field, and the first one is the one that's most like your body and is the most physical and connects you to Mother Earth. And then you asked about 6 and 7; those would be the higher levels, mm-hmm. and they're connected to points in the brain. And because a chakra is a wheel of energy that's turning, hopefully in the right direction. It's not necessary to focus on the direction because you're inside the box, and it would be very confusing. You might, have it turning the wrong way. So what you do is you center yourself and say to yourself, how do I feel? And do I feel like I'm together, or do I feel kind of shattered or anxious or disconnected? And then you'll know whether or not your energy field is in right shape or not.
What's the difference if you perceive or sense your chakra center going counterclockwise as opposed to clockwise?
Well, that just means that you probably need a little help to turn it around. And there I'd point people back to my book, Be Your Own Shaman, and encourage them to read it. And I think they'll get a good sense of what, if something's wrong, what to do about it.
Deborah, in your book, you talk about journaling constantly. Is that really a very important part of healing yourself?
I found it to be one of the best keys around, and I really urge people, you don't even have to use that fancy a word, Sandy. We could just call it, jotting down our thoughts, or, just grab your laptop or pen and paper and throw down a few words without spell checking it or posing. It's just for you. It's where you can be totally honest. If your sibling is driving you nuts, just admit it. Don't pretend for someone else's sake that things aren't as they are. Instead, level with yourself. So I'm always encouraging people to be super truthful with themselves. You don't have to change anything. You just have to acknowledge it, at least initially. Just acknowledge how you really feel. And that will keep you from splitting off from your own stuff. So we always want to know how we really feel about that nasty divorce or our wicked stepmother or whatever. We don't want to gloss over it or pretend. It's really important to be in touch with your true feelings. And journaling is one of the simplest ways to go about that. It actually clears the psyche and helps you access deeper parts of yourself where you can find out how you really feel, because you may not really know. Our unconscious, is 90% of what's happening.
Uh-huh.
So a large part of what we're really thinking, we don't have a clue. And so journaling is a great way to tap into your own subconscious and unconscious.
Good stuff. Deborah, in your book, you talk about an exercise. Forgive me if I'm saying it wrong. Is it recapitulating?
Right, I do talk about that. Uh-huh.
Could you describe for the listeners here what that process is and why you do it?
Well, it's a multifaceted process that I learned from some shamans from ancient, where Mexico now is. This would be several thousand years ago, that they discern these practices and the value of them for us human species, and they're still taught. You can, still learn them, and I learned them. I teach one of them, one of the simpler ones, right on my Facebook page. If you just like the page, you'll be able to access that information. And then the more complicated ones I teach, that's right, I do teach one of the more complicated ones in Be Your Own Shaman. And then there's an even stronger one that I teach in person at workshops. And what they do is help us disconnect from that negative energy we were just talking about a minute ago.
Okay. And also in your book, you talk about initiations, and I found that to be very interesting. And you've had quite a few profound experiences yourself in your life. Initiations are more the positive ones, but I want to talk about that, we'll call it dark side of the force experience you had, where you were tempted by something in the room one night. Can you tell us about that, please?
Oh, I can. I had a really bizarre encounter with the dark side. It was fairly far along in my journey, and I was actively working as a healer. So I was no longer a kid, and I was frustrated. I was stuck. I had plateaued. I couldn't seem to get anywhere, and one night I was awake, and it was around midnight, and I realized there was a very dark presence in my room, in my bedroom. I was like, yikes! It was pretty startling. And I heard a voice that suggested to me that if I aligned myself with what felt like a very negative energy,
right,
felt very evil, that if I aligned with it, I'd get what I wanted. I would become very powerful. And I naturally I considered it, and then I realized, oh my God, this is the ultimate test.
Uh-huh.
And I took some major measures in the next 2 nights to align myself with the light instead, and I don't want to give away the whole storyline, so I went and send the reader to the book, Be Your Own Shaman, to hear the rest, but it was quite an experience. And I hope others don't have it because I think it was very unusual. I don't think it's common.
One thing that struck me throughout your book, Deborah, is that you don't know what's going to be on the next page because you sprinkle it with stories of the past, the present, and what people can do. It's very well written. As a media host, my job is to ask questions and get to the bottom of things.
And you're doing a very good job of it.
But I can't help but credit where credit's due. And when you come across material that is written for the benefit of the people, not some hidden political agenda or anything like that. It's just, there's nothing wrong with political books anyway, but this book is very well written, and like all good authors in this field, Deborah does an extraordinary good job of spilling the truth on her own path. And some of it will make your hair stand up on your back. And you realize what an extraordinary journey this woman has been through, and more extraordinary enough, the amount of healing she's doing for other people and bringing happiness to folks pretty effortlessly. I done a couple of the exercises in the book, Be Your Own Shaman, and they work. Can't explain it, but they absolutely fantastic. They're very easy to do. Only took about 5 to 10 minutes. So absolutely brilliant book here. Now let's close out here for the next 5 to 10 minutes. The chapter 9, if you don't mind me telling the audience where the chapters are here. Chapter 9 was about initiations, and I found that was quite an interesting few pages there. Can you talk a bit about that, please, Deborah?
Oh, I'd love to, because it's my favorite activity and the one that I seem to be best suited for, and it came totally out of the blue. I'll tell you how it started. I was a young student of healing, and I was studying under a Christian minister at the time, a very esoteric Christian group that taught hands-on healing. It was a fairly unusual group. And I was watching him work in the front of the room, and I was, as usual, in the back row. It seemed to be my lot. And all of a sudden, something happened up front. He was working with some woman, and she fell over, and I fell to my knees. I just felt this huge rush of energy. Mm-hmm. And I turned to the person sitting next to me, and I said, "What in the world is going on?" And she whispered back, and she said, "Oh, that's what they call slaying in the spirit," which is not an expression I'd heard. I was new to Christian healers. This was my first foray into that arena. And I was just so blown away by it, and I not only followed that particular preacher around, but a whole series of them. I ended up spending years with that in that field, and got real good at what they would call bringing in the Holy Spirit. Now, your listeners might call it something entirely different, but it's the very same thing. They may very well call it a Kundalini experience, or the awakening of the Kundalini, and it's the exact same thing. That's the interesting thing. It's just a different term. Uh-huh. So when I left those Christian healers, I swung a complete 180 and ended up studying hands-on healing with what you'd call a mystery school in the chakra tradition, which is Hindu in origin. And I spent many, many years in an ashram studying meditation and healing from some Hindu seers. So very different sort of experience, but all in all, the same result occurs. You might be coming from a totally different path, but you're going to get to the same point. And the fun thing, Sandy, is the two camps don't talk to one another, don't know that each is really producing the same effect. Very suspicious of each other, I might add. And I was always very quiet. I was very quiet about where I had learned these different techniques, because the new teacher might get quite defensive if he or she knew that I had learned this over in the enemy camp.
Right.
But basically, the word initiation, it means the same thing as Kundalini. It's just the Western expression for the very same result. It means an expansion of consciousness, a awakening of your spirit, a rising of the energy from in the sacrum. That's where the Kundalini in the Hindu tradition, they call it the coiled serpent, because it's as if there is some energy trapped there, and when you're ready, and it's not safe to do this to you until you're ready, and that's my job, is to discern who's ready.
Right.
I, as a facilitator, as a midwife, I can make it happen, but I never do it unless I'm positive you're ready, because that could damage the experience for you or even hurt you. So I'd counsel your listeners to be super careful there and be sure they're working with someone that they know is coming from a place of integrity and not from a place of ego. I have seen people who try to bring these experiences on for themselves, for their own ego satisfaction, and it can be quite risky.
Yeah, and I got a taste of that throughout your book, Deborah, that you caution people about ego, and you also warn a couple of times about don't let other psychics and clairvoyants and healers take away your own power.
That's so right, and we want to give it away. We're always wanting to have somebody tell us what maybe we could find out from ourselves if we would be willing to spend the time and the self-discipline and go within. And so in Be Your Own Shaman, and also on my Facebook page, I'm giving people tools that they can do this for themselves at home, no cost. Just tune up your own skills a little bit. You are your own shaman. You absolutely are. You already have a lot of these abilities. They just need perhaps to be awakened, and my book goes a long way to waking you up in that regard. And then you can really consult your own higher self and get a lot of the answers to the questions that you're asking yourself. Like one of the things I teach in Be Your Own Shaman is how to use a pendulum. And a pendulum can help you access all kinds of great information from your own unconscious. That's actually where it's coming from.
Yeah, that's right. You talk about that in your book too. Your book is so easy to read. I struggle reading books, even as an author myself. I am hopeless at reading material. I read yours in a day and a half.
Excellent. I wanted to make it super easy for people so they could have a good time, kick back, and it goes down easily. What's the song from the Dr. Doolittle and the medicine goes down? That song, I can kind of hear it. I try to do that because we're all super crazy busy. No one has time for anything, including reading, and so I really spoon feed my reader, who's either reading my book or watching my videos, or studying with me at any of the different levels that I offer information, is I try to make it super easy that they can get it without straining and not have to break their arm, because everyone's overworked and overtired.
Yeah, it's easy to read, but it's easy to understand, Deborah. You're not going off the edge where you need a dictionary beside the book to understand what you're talking about. And once you start reading it, folks, you won't want to put it down. And so be warned, when you start reading it, you'll be there for a while. So it's that good, right?
And remind them, Sandy, that be sure to get the hard copy. This is not the book to get the ebook version. Get the hard copy so that you actually get the energy that I impressed into the book itself.
Yes.
It'll make it much easier for you to have that personal transformation that you're seeking if you actually hold the book in your hands.
All right, there you have it, folks.
Use it as a pillow. Sleep on it.
There you have it, folks, the wisdom from the own author. Right, where do you have any upcoming book signings or events you're going to in the next month or two?
Oh, my word. Let's see. Today I'm in Palm Springs because I have an event here in Palm Springs tomorrow. I just flew in last night from New York City. And then on Monday, which is May 2nd, I have an event at the Bodhi Tree, which is that classic old-time bookstore in Los Angeles that's been around forever. It's an old spiritual bookstore. It's the original mothership. So I'll be there on May 2nd in the evening, and then I'm doing some TV segments in Los Angeles, and then I'll be headed back out to New York.
Do you have any plans to write another book?
Not at the moment. I'm seriously grappling with this one. It hit the New York Times list 2 weeks in a row, and I'm just overwhelmed with requests for interviews and information about it.
Well, good. Well, best of luck to you, Deborah, on your book, Be Your Own Shaman. Please visit Deborah King's website, Deborah King Center. .com. Link is on the main page of the Universal Learning Series website and will be on the archive show page as well. You can buy her book, Be Your Own Shaman. Link to Amazon.com is on the Universal Learning Series website. Deborah, thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to talk about your book here today with us.
Wonderful talking to you, Sandy. Really, you ask such perceptive questions. I really enjoyed it.
Thanks very much, Deborah. Have a nice day.
All right, you take care.
All right, bye-bye. That was Deborah King, author of the book, Be Your Own Shaman. It's an excellent book. I strongly recommend it to anyone. Thanks for listening to the Universal Learning Series radio show today. Have a great day.